This is Tyler, your antisocial critic and the host of the AntiSocial Network, your number one source for anachronistic conversations online. Come join us each week to hear opinions from some of the best voices discussing entertainment, politics, religion, and modern life on the internet today, most of which you've never heard of, but I have. This week, we're joined once again by Christian Toto, the editor of Hollywood and Toto, host of the new podcast Right on Hollywood, and the author of his new book, Virtue Bombs. How's it going?
It's great. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So we're 2 weeks out, roughly, from the book's release. Can you kind of say how things are going on that front? I imagine you're probably, ramping up the book tour side of things pretty fast about now.
Yeah, because of the holiday, the timing was a little bit odd, but my publisher told me as soon as January 3rd hits, it's game on. So I've been setting up a bunch of different appearances and radio show guest slots, things like that. It is interesting. The whole process has been kind of revealing in a way. First of all, the pre-sales I'm told are important, but it feels tougher to push a book that isn't exactly on a shelf right now. So that's interesting. And also, I finished the book several months ago, so I was a little worried, would it be stale? Would cancel culture wane a little bit between then and now? And no. So, and while there's lots of examples in the book that are not yesterday or the day before, it really is, it's in line with what's happening across the culture. So that's what matters.
So what is the general idea you went with for the book? I mean, obviously you're talking about woke culture and things that are going on in Hollywood. What do you summarize it as?
Well, just that the industry is changing, and that really at the end of the day, it is about how it limits freedom and creativity. And actually start the book with sort of a fictional screenwriter who's working on a project and shaping a story. And then all of a sudden he stops and thinks, wait, is this element problematic? Can I do an Asian American character and not, draw offense in some circles? Sort of when you're a storyteller, you want to create, you want to kind of get the stuff out there. And then maybe, a director, a co-writer, an actor may kind of come in and improvise or shift things or kind of sculpt the clay, as it were. And, with all these sort of woke bylaws, it restricts that. It also makes things more predictable and less exciting. And we've certainly seen it on the comedy front. I mean, when was the last Hangover, Wedding Crashers, Bridesmaids? They really don't make them anymore. The guy who directed Joker, Todd Phillips, essentially said the same. He did Old School, he did the Hangover trilogy. He's like, yeah, I'm doing Joker now because those movies aren't really welcome in Hollywood. I don't have the freedom I once had. So, when one of the more successful directors of that brand of comedy basically taps out, there's a problem.
How did the book kind of come about then?
It's funny. I was talking to one of the people at the publishing company on some, related topic, but nothing directly, tied to this. He said, hey, we should do a book together. And I was like, oh, that's very flattering. And I've always wanted to write a book just to say I wrote a book. It's one of the things you want to kind of check off and maybe never do it again because it's a lot of work. And so I said, yeah, we should. So we kind of had a phone meeting, and this was like the one topic I was really, I don't say obsessed by, but it was certainly top of mind for a long time. And I thought, what else would I write about? This is really important. It's important to me. I feel like I've been writing about it so much. It just seemed like there's no other topic I'd want to write about as far as in book form and hopefully have an impact.
So it was pretty natural then in terms of like stuff that you tend to cover all that already through Hollywood and Toto.
Yeah, I give all the credit in the world to authors who research, historical chapters or, do biographies where there's significant research. I mean, I felt like I was doing all the work for this book anyway, so I could just kind of, steer it in a very specific direction and add some form. And I have to say, I write short. I mean, I write between 700 and maybe 1,000 words most of the time. And so writing longer chapters was odd. And I also I'm sort of the king of the procrastinators. But with this project, I knew if it's like 3 weeks to my due date and I'm not really close to being ready, I just didn't want to be in that place. So I actually stuck to a regimen, got her done, and it worked out okay from that perspective.
I was gonna say, what is the process like of transitioning from short form to long form? I mean, I've been through it a little bit myself, trying to write my own stuff, but and it's in my experience, it's a completely different animal. But what was that like for you?
One of the things I like to do with my work in general is connect dots, connect cultural dots. So I think part of that helped me because when I'm writing these different chapters, it isn't just like, oh, that incident was interesting, or this actor said this, or Gina Carano gets fired unfairly. It was, what does that mean in the bigger picture? So you kind of have to bring in more examples, and the more examples you bring in, you think, oh, that's why this happened, and that's why this connects with that. So I think it kind of organically worked, but it was weird to kind of thinking, oh my God, I just wrote 2,000 words and I'm not done yet. So I got to keep on going. But, it also was liberating in a way because it forced you to kind of dig deeper and kind of grow more than you usually do.
What were some of those dots you were kind of playing with? I mean, you mentioned obviously Gina Carano, but who else have you, or your example? What other kind of examples do you dig through in the book?
Well, there's a whole chapter on kind of behind the scenes look at what's happening in Hollywood and some of the people I granted anonymity because they could get in trouble. And, someone who works at Disney and is an animator. And he talks about how the lectures that they receive, the sort of, okay, everyone has to have a company meeting. Let's talk about, white privilege and things like that. So even sort of the culture is being forcibly changed. I talked to a lot of comedians who kind of shared their experiences. And, so I think it's that perspective as well, as that it isn't just a single person not being allowed to do X or Y. It's much more broad than that. And it's a lot of it's about fear. When you have Scarlett Johansson, who I think is extremely talented, she's obviously lovely. She's a beautiful actress. And, she picks good projects. She's bankable. I mean, her movies make a lot of money for the most part. And when she's challenged by sort of the woke revolutionary guard, and she buckles and she apologizes right away, I think that has a cultural impact because if arguably the most powerful woman in Hollywood can't stand up to her critics and immediately rejects a role that she was told she couldn't play, what chance do I have as a journalist if I, face blowback? Or your neighbor down the street who works at a landscaping company, if he or she used the wrong phrasing in an ad, without any animus or malice behind it, they're in trouble. So I think sometimes from a cultural point of view, we mock celebrities. They don't affect the culture and they're just big stars and they're progressive and don't listen. Well, in a way they do matter, in a way they do count. And, when the most powerful of the powerful can't show a backbone and can't stand up for themselves, then I think there's a trickle down effect.
Where did you find a lot of these sources? Are these people that sought you out specifically, or sought out people you know?
Again, because I'm in this sort of terrain, it wasn't hard. I used kind of connections to find other connections sometimes. So again, it just was an organic part of the process. I knew a lot of this stuff, and I speak to a comedian who's very outspoken and very bold, and I'd ask her, who else do you know? Put me in touch with other folks, and other folks were glad to talk, because often those who are really struggling and fighting for their rights to be able to say what they want to say, they don't get a lot of receptive reporters talking to them. They may either get scolded or ignored. So I think for some people it's probably cathartic.
Where do you think the woke phenomenon comes from in Hollywood? Do you think that this is something that's being enforced from the top down at a corporate level, or do you think this is something that's being pressured from a grassroots up level, kind of in the Barry Weiss kind of side of things? Or is it a
You
combination of
know,
both?
I think it's all across the board. I think it's a culture that, it could be a gaffer on the set or someone, pulling the strings and calling the shots behind a movie. But I do think there's a kernel of guilt here, maybe even more than a kernel, maybe a lot of guilt, because I think Hollywood has done a terrible job of inviting everyone to the table. I mean, you look at the numbers as far as the number of female directors, number of, Black executives behind the scenes. They're terrible. So I think there is a sense of we've been bad for quite some time. And actually, as progressive as Hollywood is, I think that the public at large is often more progressive. When I grew up in the 80s, and Eddie Murphy was the biggest star in the world, and no one batted an eye that he was an African-American comedian. He just was funny, and we loved him, and we would line up to see any movie he did. And, but behind the scenes, can we do a black themed movie? Would that sell overseas? I mean, there were lots of sort of built-in institutional items that were not helpful, to say the least. So I think there's a collective guilt going on there that they did people of color and different communities wrong, and they have to course correct. And I think that's generally a good thing. I mean, we want all the talented people to have their say. I mean, in recent years, a comedian turned out to be one of the most interesting horror directors around, Jordan Peele. I can't wait for any movie he makes. He's terrific. He's interesting, and he doesn't agree with my political philosophies, but he's fascinating to watch. And I think he often weaves them in a way that's entertaining and doesn't really kind of bludgeon me. He makes it part of the experience. I'm all for that. I don't have to be, I don't have to get the same messages over and over again. But so I think that's a part of it. They recognize how wrong they've been in the past, but I think this course correction is detrimental to real progress.
I don't know if you've read my essay on woke capitalism in the film industry, but I kind of, being someone who's worked in film in a very, bottom level boom operator capacity, my read on a lot of what's happening with the woke stuff is that a lot of it is incentive based. That there's a lot of demand for progressive stuff from the bottom up, and a lot of and kind of in the Barry Weiss school idea that that a lot of corporations see profit motives in the woke stuff, and that they think that they can sell a lot of it to the public because they think that there's a demand for diversity hires and anti-capitalist stories and everything you can fit under that. And like you said, not all of it's completely unjustified, but it does have a way of filtering down some very radical ideas into the discourse. What do you think is the way to kind of challenge the more pernicious side of this, and how do we distinguish between the pernicious side and the non-pernicious side? Because there's going to be obviously a side of us that says, we have to reject all of it, and that's not necessarily true, because we don't want to reject, a film just because it has a black crew or a black story.
Yeah, I mean, I think the art should come first. I mean, I think two examples that jump to mind for me are Black Panther, which was certainly, you could hail it as a milestone. You have a superhero film with almost entirely black cast, with a few exceptions, black people behind the scenes. And yet, I don't think that movie was marketed as this is, you need to see it, you must see it, you must not dislike it. This is Black Panther. It's a wonderful movie. It's a sort of a new creative extension of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it was good. And I think the same held true with Wonder Woman, the first film, where I don't think the framing of it was aggressively, you must like it, we must have this be successful. It was like, this is just a wonderful movie. It's fun, it's charming, it's got lots of action. And so I think when the art and the excellence comes first, that's where we need to kind of rally around it and celebrate. And I compare that to Ghostbusters, the 2016 film, which I think on some level, maybe the people behind the scenes knew they had an inferior product. And everything about that, sort of the launch, the marketing, even the journalistic framing of it was, we need this to be successful because women, young girls must see scientists on screen in order to aspire to be a scientist one day. And, if the original film was all male, this is all female, you mustn't dislike it. I mean, that was really directly what was spoken. I think even the Washington Post kind of finger wagged at us. So I think when it comes to the right from the wrong, the best way and the wrong way, I think we should lead with the talent and the ability and the artistry, and and kind of push aside sort of the woke framing, because I don't think that really helps.
So you say the subtitle of the book has "How Hollywood Lost Its Soul." What do you mean by that specifically?
Well, they're losing their creativity. They're not willing to defend themselves. They're not willing to defend art, and they're not willing to speak up for free speech, which just boggles my mind. Why is it that I have to speak to Chrissy Mayer, a very funny comedian, but certainly she's no A-lister, she's no George Clooney, but she's actually more bold, more brave, more courageous when it comes to free speech than Tom Hanks and George Clooney and Meryl Streep and Denzel Washington? Why is she the voice of creativity and free expression? This should be something that every artist should be, applauding and cheering and defending, and yet they're not. When every cancel culture episode happens, the usual suspects are deathly silent. And that leaves a Chappelle or a Ricky Gervais or an Adam Carolla to speak up, and God bless them, they're doing the right thing, I think. But where are the big stars? If there was a concerted effort, almost like an election timed event where everyone's pushing for the Democrat to be the president, if there was that effort, that sort of energy and enthusiasm for free speech and free expression, I think there'd be a radical change in the culture, but we're not seeing it.
I mean, it wasn't even that long ago where most of these people were very pro free expression and free speech. I mean, give or take 20 years, and go back to 2000 when the world was right side up. That it felt that these were the people that were pro freedom of expression not very long ago.
Yeah, two quick examples. There's a recent documentary, I think it's called Too Soon: Comedy After 9/11. It's really interesting, and it shows a lot of these comedians how they processed that terrorist attack and how they didn't flinch from telling jokes about it, surrounding it, kind of putting it into context. And then, of course, they kind of segued into criticism of the Iraq War. But all those things are part of a healthy conversation. And I think some of those same comedians, including Mark Maron, who's been really depressing to hear when he talks about cancel culture, have basically done a 180. Another quick example is Tina Fey. A few years ago, the early version of the woke mob came for her. She was telling the wrong jokes on her Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, and she came out and almost arrogantly said, I have a policy. I don't explain my jokes. And now she's like, oh gosh, I'm an ally. I appreciate the fact that we're being told what jokes are appropriate and inappropriate. So, she got targeted, she got attacked, and she's had an awakening. Is it authentic? I don't think so. I think if you have a few drinks in her and have a conversation, at a cocktail party, she'd probably be furious at what the state of comedy is right now. But she's playing by the new rules, and she apparently feels like she has to.
When do you think this transition happened? It kind of feels like between 2000 and 2020, like something shifted, but it doesn't seem like, I don't know if there was a clear demarcation point.
I think Trump had something to do with it. He spoke out against cancel culture and some of these sort of cultural themes. So initially, I mean, that would make the left and the media, which is essentially one and the same now, sadly, sort of rally against him and against what he's saying. So I think that was part of it for sure. And I think I think it's what Adam Carolla said, not famously. I wish it was a famous statement because I think it's important. He says, "You retreat, they encroach." For every person who bows down and apologizes and buckles, the more power this movement has. It was funny. Ellie Kemper was attacked in maybe it was last year sometime when she was like 18, 19. She appeared at some sort of beauty pageant or ball or some sort of event, and the event had some racist, undertones in the past. I don't think it's that way now, and I don't think it was that way when she was there. But she was called a KKK princess, and she was slammed across the media. And it was so funny because she didn't say anything for a long while. I thought, well, that's the right approach. Often, but not always with these cancel culture attacks. If you can just lay low, the mob finds another target, and they kind of lose interest in you. They haven't gotten their reaction. But it seemed like just as that was about to pass by, the crisis was over, she came out and did her apology tour. So I'm like, oh gosh, it's so close, but not quite.
And some of this was ossifying as far back as, a decade ago. I mean, the PC Principle episode of South Park, which came out in like 2014, and that kind of felt like it was hitting like some sort of progressive stride even then. I mean, I remember back then I was still in college, and my leftist Berkeley educated college professor told everyone in class that they needed to go watch the new South Park season because of how sharp it was. And I guarantee you now he's not telling anyone that. But it feels like this is like we're like watching some sort of escalation. That's kind of why it feels kind of scary as things go farther along, because it doesn't feel like things are necessarily turning in the right direction yet.
Yeah, it moves very, very quickly. The George Floyd death and riots, I think, really poured kerosene on this particular cultural fire. I want to mention two quick things that predate what we're talking about. Is PCU, which was a comedy, kind of a hit or miss comedy. I think David Spade was one of the co-stars, Barry Piven. That came out mid-90s. That was kind of just scratching the surface of what it meant to be politically correct or politically incorrect. But there's a really fascinating nugget I was given on Twitter. And gosh, I forget who gave it to me, but I kudos to him because it was really a great tip. He sent me a clip of Siskel and Ebert, the great critical team. And I'm thinking it's mid-90s, maybe later 90s. But the two of them directly address political correctness and how it's wrong and how critics should stay far, far away from political correctness in their work. It's fascinating to listen to that clip and to hear what they have to say. And I mean, they both have passed on, sadly, but I'd love to hear one or both of them revisit that conversation, revisit what they said, and to see if they still agree with it. Because obviously, most critics don't. Most critics are woke, and most critics going to let their progressive values, flavor their reviews. It's pretty obvious.
You don't seem particularly hopeless about the situation, though. In the book, it seems like you think there's a way out of this, or a hope, or a path forward that allows us to kind of circumnavigate much of what's happening. What do you think that is?
Well, sometimes you have to have enough people who get bit before things happen, and before we have more kind of cultural warriors on the side of free expression. Aaron Sorkin recently was attacked for some of the comments he made, and for casting I believe it's Javier Bardem. I believe he's a Spanish actor, and he's playing a Cuban in Being the Ricardos, Sorkin's new film. And Nicole Kidman is Australian, and she's playing an American comedic icon in Lucille Ball. Sarah Silverman got bit. She was super woke, and she's sort of graduated down a bit when she lost a film role, because she had dressed up in blackface years ago for an old sitcom episode of her show. But she wasn't being racist. She was actually, I believe, sort of exploring racism and criticizing it. So one of the more stubborn elements of this cancel culture is that it lacks nuance entirely. You can't say, well, listen, I use this formula because I wanted to expose bigotry. It's like, okay, it's a blackface in the episode. You can't have that all of a sudden. So, and even if we accept that blackface is unacceptable, which I'm fine with, I understand the cultural ramifications. If we look back at someone doing it, 20 years ago, and there's context and there's nuance, and it's actually, a way to speak out against racism, and we kind of cancel someone for that, that's when it gets kind of crazy, and that's where the artistry really suffers as a result.
I mean, the most recent example I can think of that is the Community episode that got moved to Netflix because because I forget the actor's name, but one of the Asian actors on the show dressed up as a dark elf in just straight up in like, not even like blackface, just black face paint. And they acknowledge on the show that what he's doing is not good. So there's no,
Right.
and that's from freaking Dan Harmon, like the king of Hollywood leftism. This guy is the guy who went on his Dungeons and Dragons show and did a 10-minute monologue about how the war against Trump is about to begin. Like they're going after leftists really hard.
Yeah, it used to be if you were left of center, you got a bit of cultural protection. You still do to an extent, but it really has weakened. I think the cultural protection I'm talking about really basically has saved Alec Baldwin, who has behaved oh so badly over the years, even before the accidental shooting that he was directly involved in. But others, Tina Fey is very woke and very progressive and very sort of left of center. That didn't prevent her. Will Ferrell has come under fire in recent years, and he's a very progressive fellow. So it's not enough. It often helps, for sure. Just recently, Patton Oswalt is in the news for his connection to Dave Chappelle, and now some of his older material is resurfacing, as it always does. And it's not very progressive, and it's not very woke, and it's not very enlightened. And we'll have to see what happens to him. So, things were acceptable 20, 30, even 10 years ago that are seemingly unacceptable now. And we could have those cultural debates, but do we go back in time and punish people for thought crimes that weren't thought crimes at the time? It's kind of scary.
So, do you think there's a point where this hits critical mass and we kind of experience what we did in the 90s, where political correctness just became a laughingstock, or do you think that it's going to intensify for the immediate future and then slowly decline?
Yeah, I think it's B rather than A. I mean, I'm hoping for A. I'm hoping for A tomorrow. But I think, one of the things that's supporting it, giving it blood, two things: the media and social media. So reporters are all in on woke culture and cancel culture. The Wrap did a 4-part series on cancel culture, and I thought, it's a left of center Hollywood site, but certainly they're aghast at some of these situations involving woke theatrics, and no, not really. They seem to cheer it on. Even their comedy panel and subjects seemed a-okay. Matter of fact, they were going to have Jim Jim Norton, who's a very sort of not PC, throws sharp elbows comedian on that particular panel. I was kind of excited by that, and then all of a sudden he didn't appear. So I thought, hey, but between the media, which is again on cancel culture side, and social media, which it's where it often germinates and flowers and blooms. I don't think we're going to see a quick fall from this period in time, but I have to hope it's going to happen. I mean, I can't imagine. I don't imagine the alternative. How horrible that would be.
Have you seen anything encouraging in 2021? I mean, obviously everything that's happened since the George Floyd situation, and that you're right. That definitely did feel like there was like that was the moment where a lot of this kind of just cemented and
Yeah.
entrenched itself in some way that it's almost impossible to root out at times. But are there signs that point in the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are flickers of hope. I mean, the Gina Carano story, I mean, canceled by Disney unfairly, to say the very least. And then the Daily Wire comes along and says, hey, we want to make a movie with you. And now she's making movies. I had a chance to meet her, interview her. She couldn't have been more of a delight, just a real person, sweet and kind. But more importantly, I think she feels emboldened by what happened to her, that she didn't want to stay silent. And now she's getting opportunities. I look at comedians like Ryan Long and JP Sears. You know, one of the stereotypes about woke culture against the artists are, well, you just want to say the N-word from a comedy stage. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. They do want to explore some tough areas with humor, with art, but it's often to expand our minds and make us challenge our preconceptions. And so, a comedian like Ryan Long, he may work in an R-rated fashion, like dropping F-bombs and things, but he's not a racist. He's trying to explore things. As a matter of fact, he's pointing out how the woke culture can often be racist directly. So I think his success, Tim Dillon, Joe Rogan, just come roaring out of the gate toward the end of the year. I think he's going to be a significant cultural figure in 2022. I actually fear for him, as far as I think the media, which has been attacking him and critical of him and ready to kind of make fun of him, I think they're going to go to war against him. I think we haven't even seen it yet, because I think they're kind of gearing up for their battle plans. That sounds kind of apocalyptic and conspiracy minded, but they don't like him. They don't like his power. They don't like the fact that he speaks to all the wrong people, that he gives others voice that they don't want to have a voice. And they're not going to take that lying down. So it's going to be fascinating to see in 2022 how he responds and how the media responds to him.
I mean, Rogan's in a lucky position because he's almost untouchable. I mean, Spotify would have to abdicate their $100 million contract with him in order to, cancel him in any appreciable fashion, even though it appears that there are people at Spotify that actively want to and actively are suppressing his stuff. But
Sure.
He might be in like the best position. And thankfully we are starting to see, the first, little tiny blossoming of things that the right wing has been complaining about for decades with the Daily Wire's film studio. I mean, that's been something, people like Andrew Klavan have been harping on for like 20 years. We need our own film studios. We need our own art. We need our own film studios. People that are actually putting the effort out there and just being unashamedly themselves and not paying lip service to this.
Yeah, the Daily Wire thing is so interesting, and if they're successful, others may kind of clone what they're doing. The Rogan situation is so interesting to me, in part, two reasons. One, they made it personal with him. He had COVID. He took ivermectin along with some other drugs. His doctor kind of just threw the kitchen sink at him. And all the media outlets, or most of them, or too many of them, said, oh, it's horse dewormer. Well, it's not horse dewormer. It is a drug that is used for multiple reasons and multiple practices, but it is used regularly and successfully and safely with humans. That's what he took. So I think he saw that and got enraged, and rightly so. And now he's on the warpath, kind of breaking narratives. But what matters about Rogan is that he's not overtly political. I think he's probably genuinely left of center, if anything, maybe a little bit of libertarian mixed in. So he's not seen as a Ben Shapiro, as a Sean Hannity. So that really makes what he says more important, because it can't be just instantly discounted as like, well, he's a partisan, he's a conservative, I don't listen to him. He's not. And that's problematic, I'm sure, to his critics.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he started out as a, hippie conspiracy theorist who hung out with Alex Jones and Eddie Bravo. So he's always been kind of, libertarian, left of center, but he's got what, 2,000 podcasts under his belt at this point that prove what he actually said he stands for. I'm sure there's stuff they could try to nominally cancel him for buried in there. Like there's weird,
Oh yeah.
bad out of context quotes that exist that he probably would say that I don't stand by that anymore. But like I'm hoping he might have some invulnerability going into this year because you're right, he might be one of our most valuable voices right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. Tim Dillon, I don't know if I mentioned him already, but he's fascinating too. And I listened to his show, and it's so goofy. It's a podcast and a video podcast as well. And he often takes contrarian views, which are morally wrong. Like he talks about these murder cases, and he kind of sides with the murderer sometimes. But he's being outrageous, and he's being silly, and he's trying to kind of just poke and prod and see where the parameters of comedy are. Because at the end of the day, Joe Rogan is a comedian. I shouldn't be like, what do I want to do about the pandemic and COVID? Oh, I should write down exactly what Joe Rogan says. No, I mean, he could open my mind. He can introduce me to new thinking, but it's up to me to do my homework and to speak to doctors and to consult with the people in my life to make the decisions. But if a Joe Rogan opens up our minds and leads us into conversations that we weren't having before, I think that's a really good thing. But he is a comedian. He's not a news source. And the news sources we see get plenty of stuff wrong, often aggressively so. So they should have a little bit of humility when it comes to their Joe Rogan attacks.
We can only hope. So circling back to the book, what are you hoping to do that it's able to do in the next couple of months as it starts rolling out in the coming weeks?
I mean, I hope more people talk about it. I hope it stirs a conversation. I start the book with kind of a bit of a biography of myself and my story. And what I really hope comes through the book is two things. I want people who are left of center and open-minded to read it. I would love that. That'd be amazing to me. But also, I mean, I want it to be seen as I'm not this red meat, vicious, nasty Hollywood hater. When I was a kid, I watched Abbott and Costello movies with my dad. It's why I love movies. I remember when I was the first time I walked into a VHS store, I thought, oh my gosh, I could watch any movie I wanted any time. Like I got into this business because I love Hollywood and movies. This is what I do. This is what I care about. It's my passion. And it's been sad and disheartening to see what's happening in Hollywood. I mean, the fact that the Hollywood players don't agree with my politics, it's a bummer. I don't love that. But I'm a big boy. I can handle that. But when they don't stand up for art, and when they kind of, when they bow to China, but they don't stand up for their fellow artists, I've got a real problem with that. So I think my love affair with Hollywood has hit some rocky patches, and I think it's captured in the book. But I wanted people to realize that someone who does love content, who does love movies, and sees their unifying power and their cultural power, and I want great stories back. That's what I want first and foremost.
That's a little different than some people I've heard too, because anecdotally and stereotypically, it seems like there's a lot of right wingers who have just completely given up on Hollywood. I can't tell you how many people I know who think that like cinema is a dying medium, that it's not worth saving, that we just need to let the whole thing just fall apart. And I am against that incredibly because it is it is the core art form of our day right now. And we have completely ceded the territory of it to the point where now it's being actively used against us, and it's not. There's no longer any space for us there anymore. We have to fight for every single film that pushes for our values, and sadly, a lot of them just haven't broken through. Like we almost had Richard Jewell, but that bombed, and there's other ones that have bombed that we've tried to push through, but. We need Hollywood.
The Richard Jewell example hurts me because I think it's one of the better films the last few years.
Which one?
And it really spoke to right of center values in a way that few films do. And it had everything lined up to be just a smash in many ways. And I think conservatives are their own worst enemies when it comes to pop culture too often. For every Andrew Klavan who gets it and has gotten it for years, there are many more who ignore it, who dismiss it, who demean it just out of hand. I think we should all be more pop culture literate and understand how important it is.
Speaking of Andrew, he wrote the introduction for your book. How did that kind of?
He did. I know him a tiny bit. He has been nothing but kind to me. I respect him so much as a talent, as sort of a thought leader. As someone who it's just fascinating to listen to. And when I was thinking about it, I guess I should have a forward for my book. He was the only guy I thought about, and he was gracious enough to write it for me. So I couldn't be happier to have him connected with the book. And I know it's just a small part of it, but it matters because I do think he is respected in the industry. He's in the industry, and I think he's just so smart. And I think I'm in my 50s now, and I feel like sometimes artists, as they get older, they lose their mojo. They're not as creative, and I fear that within myself. I want to keep trying to get better and grow. And I think Andrew's in his 60s now, and he still writes great books, and he's still, on the tip of the culture. And he's inspirational to me.
Well, you and Tyler Smith are lucky enough to be his resident film critics whenever he wants to talk about Hollywood. So,
yeah, I couldn't. And it's funny, just on a pragmatic note, I'm lucky enough to do a lot of media appearances. We're talking here. I do podcasts and things. I have to say, the one show where whenever I do it, I get an instant feedback or I get sort of results is Andrew Klavan's podcast. My Twitter followers bloom, or I sell more books, or he has a real connection with his audience. That speaks highly of him.
How many times have you been on at this point?
6, 7 times, I would say, over the last few years, I guess. I think his show is less guest driven now than it was before. He kind of switched gears a bit. And it's also once a week instead of 4 times a week. So I think he has less guests in general.
Yeah, that's true. So, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. What are your plans now going in the next couple of weeks? What shows are you going to be appearing on?
Well, there's one I'm actually flying to LA for. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it yet, so I'm kind of excited about that one. I believe I may be on Adam Carolla and Dan Bongino if they're kind enough to have me. I've never been on Dan's show, but he's kind of reached out to me and said that would be a possibility. I'll probably be all over. I mean, this is like a new thing for me, this sort of the book publicity tour. And I think one of my fears about it, though, is that you become overexposed. I know when Dave Rubin was, pushing his most recent book, Don't Burn This Book, I mean, it kind of consumes you. So I want to kind of stay sane during this process and hopefully not push off people who might otherwise be interested in what I have to say.
Will you have any opportunities to do like signings or anything like that, or?
In the Denver area where I'm based, I may be having a book signing. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know how important that is. I'm certainly not a name and that will draw, throngs of fans. So it might be a wasted energy and effort on my part. But again, selfishly, one of the things I want from this book is I want more people to kind of know what I do, because I think it's important. I would love it if more people start doing what I do. If there were more right of center film critics kind of rushing in and sharing their thoughts and honing their craft, that would be wonderful. And I also hope, again, that more people who are left of center give this book a try and open their mind to it and see what I'm saying. It's, in a weird way, this has become a left-right issue, but in many ways it shouldn't. It really shouldn't. And it's one of the reasons why conservatives embrace Ricky Gervais and John Cleese and some other figures who are unabashedly left of center, J.K. Rowling as well. But we really do, on the right, appreciate people who are speaking up on this issue, and we applaud them. And, at the end of the day, John Cleese and I will disagree on Trump and disagree on, policy. Who cares? Let's have that debate. That's what this is all about. We just want to be able to have that debate and not be silenced.
All right, then. So where's the best place for people to get a copy of Virtue Bombs, then?
Well, it's on Amazon and it's on, I'm sure, Barnes & Noble. I think any place books are sold, you should be able to find it. It shouldn't be too challenging. You can go to my website, hollywoodintoto.com. Once the book goes live, I'll have information on it there. I'm kind of holding off and just kind of letting the pre-sales kind of go onto themselves. So that's 2 places. And if people are curious about the work I do, the podcast is Right on Hollywood. And again, one of the things I want to do in 2022 is have more left of center folks on as guests and either talk about their art, plain and simple, or you just maybe having respectable debates about what's going on in the culture. I'd love to have more of that. I've had a little bit of it so far, and it's a new show, but I want to do more of it.
Have you had any resistance to that as someone who's right of center? Or publicly right of center?
For the most part, I've been really lucky. I try to be a gentleman about all the things that I do. I'm not name calling viciously on social media. I'm not nasty. I've had some instances where people either backed out of a podcast interview. I've had an incident where I had a colleague of mine interview someone and then they realized it was a right of center site and they wanted the story taken down. So there have been moments, but I think actually Hollywood has been pretty fair to me. I get a lot of interview possibilities. I get a lot of screeners and screening links. So I think by being as gentlemanly as possible, as not being vicious, and if there's a left of center movie that's good, I'm going to say it's good, and I don't want to be the guy who doesn't like a movie just because it doesn't agree with my values. So I have to be true to my craft. I'm a film critic. I have to kind of recommend movies that are well made as opposed to just agreeing with me.
There you go. His book is Virtue Bombs. It's by Christian Toto. I appreciate being able to have you on today. It was good to talk to you again.
Oh, I enjoy this. Thanks so much.
Sure. Have a good day.
The AntiSocial Network is a Groupthink Productions podcast. Editing, producing, and hosting are by Tyler Hummel, artwork by Crystal Cowley, and original music was composed by Melissa Lafira and the late Dan Smolla. Like, subscribe, and please let us know what you think about the show in the comments below if you'd like to see anyone interesting be a guest on the show. Thank you for listening.